everyone. Let's start about how Karan. How did you get into the developer relations role? Because as it's one of the most important roles, I believe, in the developer ecosystem. So how did you get started?
Great. First of all, thanks, Rachit and the entire team for having me over here. Happy to, interact with all of you and take up any questions and share what I know. So the first thing, Rachit, you asked about developer relations. It's a I would say there is a lot of myth and aura surrounding developer relations. I was speaking at the developer relations Asia Pacific conference sometime in December, and it was a theme that came up a lot as well. And many of them think that it's developer relations is all about all the things that you see at speaking at events or just
Agreed.
traveling across, etc. But it's not. So that's, I mean, I'm not saying that's not, but it's not the only thing about developer relations. Basically, what every developer relation professional, or at least I, strive to do is help all of the developers out there get the necessary info and tools for them to succeed in their journey. Because of course, I myself am a developer, and then I know most of the times when I'm doing something, I would probably not find the answer for it on Stack Overflow, or the code that I find
Yes.
on GitHub is not what I'm looking for. The tutorial just doesn't seem right, and
Agree. Agree.
the
Agree.
video is too long, etc. So the work of developer professionals, developer relation professionals like me, is to kind of make that more easier and kind of make it more less time consuming to get things up and running. So that's in fact how I started off as well, wherein I was once initially I was explaining some concept, saying, hey, you know what, like, why don't you do it this way? And then here are some of the resources and things, etc. And then that's how I started off my career, by helping others, at events, or by doing some tutorials and videos and things like that. And then that's how my DevRel career started off.
There is a couple of misconceptions about DevRel and a developer advocate. So, can you clear the misconceptions? Like, is it the same, or what is the difference between the roles, or it is just a terminology difference which is given by the different hierarchy of different organizations?
See, what I would say is that there are each specific organization, the way that they do DevRel is very different. There is an
Hmm.
underlying theme, and so if you compare some of the standard functions at various different organizations, you have
Yes.
you have like your product, you have your engineering, your marketing, sales, ops, and finance and whatnot, etc. So these are typically well laid out roles,
Hmm.
whereas developer relations roles are usually a combination or a multiple of all of these things, and they have different objectives and different meaning for each of the organizations they are at, right? So depending on that, in some of the organizations, developer advocate might mean the same thing as a developer evangelist, and it
Yes.
might mean the same as just developer relations manager. So
Hmm.
it kind of varies a lot from organization to organization. But generally, in most of the organizations, the common thing is, irrespective of what the title of someone on a developer relations team is, all of them work together. So someone who is in a management position might be doing advocacy. Someone who is in an advocacy role might be doing some other program management stuff, etc. So that's one thing that I feel really good about, of being in this role and function, because the way that in most of the organizations I have been at and also seen at, many people, irrespective of their titles, are very closely knit and work very closely well together.
So we might call the role of a developer relations executive as a community builder on steroids, if we may.
Well, we don't use steroids, it's just passion.
Passion, agree.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
what are your day-to-day challenges you face? I mean, as a part of your way. So, like a day-to-day schedule of sorts.
Well, it's multiple things. What day to day looks like for many of us is different. For me, one thing that I do very much deliberately every day is to keep my ears and eyes open, kind of listening to all the feedback that people keep sending us across on various different places, on my personal LinkedIn or Twitter or, emails and things like that. So to kind of like listen and understand is very, very important as a part of any DevRel person's role, because, we are the ones who want to help make developers successful. So the first things, of course, is to understand what are those challenges they are facing and help resolve that. That's the first thing. So I'm kind of like tuned into a lot on various places to kind of understand what's happening. The second thing also is to keep very tuned into the product and engineering efforts, what's happening, especially here at GitHub, since developer relations is a part of the product team, here at GitHub, and we are a part of the product team. So we kind of have to very well understand where the product is heading and what's new that's coming up, what is the community asking for, and what are the engineering efforts that going into it, what are some of the efforts going into documentation, for example,
Hmm.
to ensure that developers are being successful, etc. And the third aspect also is, how can we kind of combine both of this to help make developers successful, give them the tools that they need or the resources that they need. So for me, I work on certain programs and also initiatives, etc., to kind of marry both of these two in terms of listening and what's coming up and put them together to bring it across to developers.
So as your role involves directly talking to the users of your product, so does that type of make you a de facto PM of the product?
Not really. So so PMs are different. Within organizations. Here at GitHub, there is of course a PM team which is there, but you can think of me or some of the other folks here at DevRel as more like conduits. To give some of that feedback back into the PM and the engineering team. So they would be looking at the developer relations team to give them more inputs on what the community is really wanting about and help them prioritize in terms of features and products, etc.
All right, understood. So, we have touched upon what your role does, but we should talk about how you got started, what got you into DevRel, because that's some of the roles that openly not a lot of information is available. Like if we look at as SD role or on-site role, or if you look at a PM role, so everything has a lot of documentation available, a lot of tutorials, a lot of YouTube videos. But when you talk to DevRel, there are not a lot of things available. So how did you get started mainly?
Yeah. So before I got started, let me tell you generally what I've seen how DevRel roles are really hired. Is you can of course find certain openings and positions, etc., at various different companies for DevRel roles. But essentially, people take notice of you only once when you are helping other developers. So think of it as your application or your resume itself is based on how you're helping developers, and when you are doing that, someone is going to take note of you and then dig a little more deeper to understand what is it that you're doing, and how it's going to help others, and whether you're interested in opportunity or so, etc. Right. The second part is there are very, very few organizations as of now who have a DevRel function
Yes.
within their teams, and often it sits within various different departments in each company. It could be within engineering, it could be within product, it could be within marketing, it could be within customer success. It all depends on the organization. But there are very few organizations who are really working on it, because there are very few organizations who really realize the value itself
Agree.
of DevRel. And for me, like how I said, the really first way, and similarly, many people I've helped mentor into the DevRel career, etc., happened through their work that they've been doing itself. Say I bump into a meetup where the organizer put together a really nice meetup and brought in a lot of value, and I'm hearing many of the attendees say, "Oh, this was a great one. I learned a lot of things, etc." Right, and immediately the organizer stands out because they have brought value to so many other people. It was a similar
Agree.
case for me, where I used to help start developer groups in places where there was no sense of community at all, in a technical sense, and then kind of slowly start growing it in different cities across India, in much more challenging places, etc. as well. And then finally, I got my first, big break, so to call, wherein someone said, "Hey, I think we're starting a new DevRel function, and we want you to kind of put out what it's going to look like, and put in some more details of what we need to do, or so, etc." So that's how I started it off, and that's how many people I've helped mentor, and also many of the other folks started off as well.
So, did you get started as an undergrad, or while you were just exploring, as we usually do in our engineering lifespan? So, were you just exploring, or something struck you, like, okay, this is something that calls out to me. This is my passion. I want to do this.
Well, it was, I would say it's a little bit of the latter, because one thing is, I've always been interested in, in a lot of the performances per se on stage. So, I've been an on stage as well as, an on screen actor, and I've been hosting various different celebrity concerts and things like that. So talking to an audience is what comes naturally to me.
Yeah.
And technically as well, I'm able to explain a lot of the concepts to a very layman audience as well. I have an anecdote, if you want, which I can share later. And so kind of combining both of this, and some more of management skills, and a very depth and detail into the technical aspects of what goes into really all of this, are some of the core tenets of a developer relations professional. And I wasn't really aware of this, and only when in my first company as a DevRel person, and before that I was just doing full stack development, was when someone noticed that, hey, you do this and this, and I think that makes a really good combination for someone in DevRel. And that's how it started off. I never really knew. I said, okay, this sounds interesting, let me explore, like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And then I started exploring, and it was something that I was really good at, and I was able to give that value to the developers, to the company behind running that function, etc. as well, and it all just came together.
So, as you mentioned before, I believe DevRel is a pretty new role, to be honest. So, why do you think companies are not leveraging the power of communities? I mean, we all the products, major products, do have a dedicated marketing team, but why not use community to leverage your product?
Right. So the thing is, there are so firstly over there, right? Again, when someone says as helping, using, or rather using a community to kind of help grow the product, it's something that has actually been happening. For decades together, people are just not noticing it, because that word of community building, and then community development, etc., were not really terms used to associate those efforts.
Understood.
There are some examples, and it's a little at the back of my mind, but once I remember it, I'll just bring it up in our conversation later on. But organizations have been doing this, and the thing is, many of them think of it as something which won't give a very tangible result. So that's where most of the organizations are divided, thinking that, hey, community efforts well, we really cannot measure, and it's something that probably might not take off well, etc. And that might be the reason. I can't speak for others. That might be the reason why many of them are not adopting. But here at GitHub, community has right from the beginning been the core focus of
Yeah.
the product, of the platform itself, because the very main thing was around open source and helping the rest of the community itself. So the founders, the leaders, everyone else realizes the power of this, and which is one of the core reasons why GitHub has grown so much into what it is today.
Agree. And so like a follow up to this. So as we have the GitHub Campus Experts program. So what are the other subsidiaries that GitHub would conducts? What are the other programs? Because the Campus Experts is the only program I'm aware of. So what are the other programs that GitHub conducts for community outreach?
Right, right. So, campus experts, of course, is one of the main ones, which really helps students to give back to their community, etc. But the way that GitHub is a little different when you compare, to some of the many other companies, because one of the core foundations of GitHub, in terms of the product, is open source, right? So
Yep.
you need not have like a program like Campus Experts or 10 other such programs to actually give back to the community. You can just do this, if you just are contributing back to an open source project, or even creating an open source project. That itself is a very huge way of giving back to the community, and that is where you can leverage GitHub as well. One of the best examples for this is, there is one open source project called as Hopscotch, which
Yeah.
is basically like an API request builder, right? And, I was talking to its creator, just trying to understand, how he started off with this project, and he said, "Well, I was using these multiple tools and everything, and then it was not really fulfilling my purpose. So I thought, why not go create one, because it did not exist a similar one, and I made it open source, and now I think it has like 20,000 plus stars on GitHub, and I think on their repo they have like how many people are using it, etc. So that itself is a really huge way of how you can help and give back to the community. And I regularly keep talking to many of these maintainers and contributors, etc., and the impact that they are able to make is much larger than any specific program or so.
I completely agree. I mean, in today's world, open source has literally taken over. I mean, if we just consider AirMeet, so AirMeet is based on the WebRTC made by Google, which is again open source. So open source is impacting us in ways we don't understand. I mean, everything almost is based upon the open source software, and being a part as a developer must be amazing. So when you talk to people, maintainers, so for example, if we take script winter of code, we have project administrators. So what would you suggest to project administrators, to maintainers, to mentors, to contributors themselves? How should they form a more inclusive, a more active open source community? Because as you mentioned, like it is the most important part of open source. So how should we probably proceed in this?
Right. So there are a few, best practices when it comes to it. I won't be touching into the best practices right now, because there is an entire resource section that we have built, especially for all of them who are asking this question. So if you go to opensource.guide, you can find some of these best practices for contributors, for maintainers, and for other people, etc. But some of the other things that I want to mention, which are not really written, but I would want to advise everyone, is one is to be very open and welcoming to the rest of the community, because there are the only way to really grow your project, or to grow contributors, or to grow yourself, is to be open-minded and welcoming and warm. You can't really be very cold and say, hey, you know what, why did you even create that issue? Can't you see there is already one? So what's going to happen if you're having that tone and that kind of a welcome? people generally go and tend away saying, okay, I have a lot of things to do, I don't have to take this, etc. And a lot of them are first time contributors, first time maintainers, first time open source creators, etc. So I would really say be open. If someone comments on your issue or creates a pull request, which is something even very, very basic, encourage them, because you never know, that could be the first step that they have taken since many years. They might be thinking, okay, I need to contribute. And, it's something that they would have done after so many years. And you wouldn't want to make a bad impression to them, for them, especially when it's their very first time at all, right?
Agree.
It could be for anyone. So be understanding, be welcoming of where they are from. And that's one thing. The second thing, also, the most important thing is to provide pointers and to provide direction. That's really very important. So if you consider if you rather compare an open source project to something which is being developed at product companies, usually the direction of the specific products is driven by a certain product manager, or excuse me, a chief product officer, or certain leadership, or even by the developers, etc., right? So but
Yep.
there's some set of people who provide a general direction of how things should go. In an open source project, essentially it's probably a small group of people who have started off this project because it could be helpful, and then others are contributing, and then it's growing. But what becomes really important is to share what is your direction and vision with the rest of them as well, right? So that someone who is contributing is actually helping the project grow in its direction, rather than contributing horizontally to something that probably is not your vision, right? So that becomes very important in terms of providing a direction in, say, providing a README file or a roadmap, or however you think this should evolve. And again, having the first one as the basic rule: be open. If someone says, hey,
Yeah.
probably this should be a better feature or a direction, etc., be open and consider that. So these two things I would really call out. The rest of it, some of the best practices, as I said, you can go to opensource.guide and check it out.
So, like you mentioned in the start of the conversation that a lot of your role involves listening, and you also mentioned documentation. So can you mention the importance of documentation in open source? Because sometimes when we have a super cool project, but the project lacks a good documentation, an inclusive guide, as it's written by the point of the maintainer, it's not written by the point of view of the user or a first-time contributor. So, can you touch upon the importance of documentation? As we ourselves are an open source project, so we would like to have the best practices applied here as well.
Right, right. So one thing that's a good question. Documentation is really important, because if you think about it, when you go into any project on GitHub.com, the first thing that you land up on is README, right?
Read me, yes.
So I would say, think of that README file as a pitch, a for whoever is
Elevator
building it,
pitch.
a user or a developer, right? Think of it as a pitch. So if it is for a user, what is it that you want to communicate? If it's for a developer, what is it that you want to communicate to them? So treat it like a pitch, rather than documentation in terms of, okay, I'm going to outline everything over here, right? Because that's essentially what comes to mind to many of people. Whereas the core focus of documentation is to help navigate the journey of a user or a developer. Now, if I'm a user and if I land upon a project, right, all I'm interested in is, how do I use that project? Where do I get started? Yeah.
Yes.
So if it's a project that is, for a developer, as in the developer is an end user, then I'm probably looking at, okay, will I get a binary of this? Will I get a Docker container? Will I get how am I supposed to consume this project? How do I get
Yes.
started? So I'm interested in knowing that quick and fair, and what are the things I need to keep in mind. If I'm looking at contributing, who is often someone who has used that project before,
Yeah.
it again becomes important, wherein many of them, in fact, if you aren't aware, this is something that you would probably want to check out. At in every repo on the main project file, in the bottom right, you have a small section which says community guidelines.
Yes.
So go check out that community guidelines, because it tells you what are some of the key things that is really helpful for a project to be successful. It lists out things like, okay, do you have a contributing.md, first of all, which needs to list out as to what are some of the things that someone who's interested in contributing needs to keep in mind. So list out all of those things in contributing, and have a license file. So there are those multiple things. So go check out that. So for a contributor, a documentation will be different, because they are looking at how the project works and how it has been developed. And for an end user who could be a developer or a non-developer, it's important to know how do I consume and then use this. So need to look at it from two different angles and structure the documentation accordingly.
Understood. As like personally, I felt that there are amazing open source projects who miss out on contributors and users due to not having a good documentation. So this was something I have been meaning to ask the open source community since a while. So another follow up to the earlier question I asked. So as a part of DevRel, as you oversee the product, so do you work closely with the development and the product management teams as well? As you actually interact with the end users. So do you find their pain points, find their point of view, find their feature requests? So how does that proceed when you're working in a team hierarchy?
Absolutely, so in most of the companies, that's how it is, wherein developer relation folks work closely with the rest of the product teams. Here at GitHub, I work very closely with the various product managers, and also some of the engineering managers and the engineering leaders, etc. For various different things, whether it's a certain feedback, or a certain use case that has not been uncovered in documentation. Even with the documentation team, I work very closely, in kind of like trying to find what's happening there, etc. So
Yes.
it's very, very important, because we cannot be really siloed, and we have to work very closely with teams like how I mentioned, product management, engineering, and also customer support. Sometimes developers reach out to customer support, and might probably not get the resources that they were looking for. So there are various different teams. That's the reason why we work very closely and are closely knit with the rest of the teams as well.
So I wanted to ask something about GitHub specifically. So last year, Code Spaces came out. So how did you present that to the community? Like this is one of the first products which came into my mind, which was new this year to GitHub because personally I think GitHub is perfect. So how did you leverage that into the community?
So see, the way that it happens, is, see, developer relation folks, at least here at GitHub, we are not marketing folks,
Yeah.
So we're not here to market or sell a specific product or a feature, etc. What we are here is to answer a lot of the questions and help them in the journey. Like, for example, many of them might have already got to know about code spaces through social media or GitHub announcement,
Yes.
or through a flagship conference, etc. So but they would come back and then ask us, okay, like, how do we achieve ABC using this, or they would go into more nuance that, okay, I have like a VS Code instance, and how am I supposed to connect to my code space using that, or I have something else that I would like to bootstrap with code space, not necessarily my own repo, and I would like to add on a few other things. How do I do that, and things like that, right? So that's where we step in, and then we kind of like trying to understand, that, okay, probably these are a lot of questions which are coming in around a certain theme, and we need to kind of clarify this point and make it much more easier for developers to understand what exactly you can do, what is something that you cannot do right now, but is in the pipelines or so, and things like that. So that's where we step in, where for example, one of the things that many of them, and the reason why CodeSpace came out, was because getting up and running for a contributor to a project has been a challenge, which many of the maintainers have told us, like, hey,
Yes.
to write so much lengthy documentation to ensure that all the dependencies are taken care for a contributor and everything is set up properly, but at the same time provide flexibility as well, etc. And that's where CodeSpaces came out, because you can have a development environment that is configured according to your specific project, according to your dependencies, etc., packaged in such a way that developers can, go spin up that development environment and start contributing. So the challenge that was, being trying to address was to make it much more easier to have a development environment that is consistent, and also that is, on the cloud,
Understood.
that it provides you that power as well, right? So that's the general approach.
That sounds cool. I mean, honestly, that is pretty cool. I mean, getting to talk to community about your product. It seems like honestly, for people who love to talk to others, it is a dream role. So we have a question by Nikunj. So what are the prerequisites for campus experts? And a follow up to this: when will the campus expert program kick off again? Because honestly, there are quite a few of us who are waiting for this.
Right. I know this is a question which just comes in a lot to us regarding the campus experts. So unfortunately, there is not much, not much of an update yet. Compared to what's already there on the website. So there is a section on eligibility and things like that. But rather than saying that I'm a campus expert or so, what I would really encourage all of you to do is to kind of focus on how you can help your peers within your campus, and that is what it becomes really very important.
Agreed.
I know of many people who began by helping other peers because they're interested, and then went on to become campus experts, etc., and then gained a lot of experience. And many of them are now even in DevRel professional or kind of similar professionals, etc. Because so that's the way, it all starts off with the interest in creating an impact, and not necessarily about having a badge. uh,
Yeah,
and there is an anecdote I can share, on this as well,
I would love to hear it.
wherein impact is something which is very interesting. So one of my personal experiences where I realized this, compared to some of my other friends,
Yes,
was, I've been volunteering with the IEEE, which is the Institute of Electrical and
yes,
Electronics Engineers, for a long time now. It's almost like 10 years now, and during that time, I think it was around 2011 or so, 10 or maybe 11, was when the IEEE was launching kind of like a new exhibit section within their Hyderabad science center, and they said, hey, we want actually a few exhibits over here to be built, wherein we're going to give the funding, but we want all of you guys in the community to come together and build it. And me and three of my other friends came together who were really interested in all of these things, and we said, okay, it's going to be a good opportunity for us, because we can help create an exhibit that's going to help illustrate a lot of things to new people, and at the same time we don't have to worry about funding, because IEEE is going to give us funding to go build this. And we had really very good mentors as well, really excellent mentors who with whom we learned a lot about, and built that exhibit. And it so happened, that to kind of showcase the success of this whole thing, it was something very new for IEEE as well, and they were replicating all of the success elsewhere. To show this success, they organized a small conference, of around maybe like 50 people or so. That's all. Um, Calling in various directors of various science centers across India. Some of them traveled across from US as well, etc., to kind of share the story of how we went about doing all of this, etc. And I was very interested. I wanted to talk to others and see, and of course I was invited to come speak over there as well, talking about the exhibits that we built and all that. And it was just a previous day when when we were going and heading over to the conference, and I got a call from our mentor, saying, I think you probably have to come in a little early because we have a very special chief guest who is going to come in, to speak at the conference, etc. And
Yeah.
a couple of my friends had dropped out, because of prior commitments that they weren't able to make. And only I think the day before or the morning of the day when I went over there, and when I saw, there were sniffer dogs and bomb squad checks and all which was happening, I got to know the chief guest was Dr. Abdul Kalam, who was coming in.
Oh,
So
that's amazing.
I never really realized, what was the result, of whatever I did in order to create an impact, and got a really good opportunity to, connect and understand and interact, etc. So if I had gone in with such a kind of a mindset, probably that wouldn't have happened. Wherein, if I were looking for what is going to be the result of all of this, so that's why, I've always been an advocate of saying, just go for, how you can create an impact. The result or the recognition will automatically follow.
So what was the exhibit that you built? Because honestly, the story is amazing. I mean, that sounds like something which honestly it's inspiring. Like the impact that community can have is like amazing. It's just I can't express it because I was just blown away by it. So what was the exhibit that you built? Like a bit of curiosity, you may call it.
Yeah, the exhibits were, some of the basic illustrations in, electricals. So there was one exhibit on, it was called as it is basically to illustrate what is called as an LVDT in electronics, which is a linear variable differential transformer. So it's kind of like a basic, unit. We of course blown it into a larger way for many people to understand, but it's a very basic function which is used in, things like your aircrafts and, for measurements and things like that. And there was one other exhibit which we built for, resonance circuits, which is what is used in a very miniaturized form, of course, in your transistors and antennas, etc., to establish communication and signals and things like that. So these were like very fundamental science and engineering concepts, that, we wanted to make it easier to understand to people who didn't know how to really grasp these abstract concepts.
That's really cool. I mean, being in so many things must really be an eye-opening experience. So we have a question from Siddhant that he's asking, is it like is the DevRel role like the HR role in the company or managing the project?
It's absolutely not related to HR, I would say, because that role is slightly different. Like how we would say, the way that I would put it, for many of you to understand, is there is no single function that you can kind of compare this with any
Agreed.
other standard function, because let me give you an example. In some of the cases, we write code samples and put up, SDKs and things like that, someone that an engineer would do. So we align with engineering. We get a lot of the feedback and kind of help triage and then understand the product better and give it back to the product managers, something that a product person would do. Thirdly, we also create resources and tools, etc., to help make, some of the features and products easier to understand for the developers. If there was a no DevRel function, probably that's
Yes.
something that marketing would have done. Fourth, we also kind of very closely listen to what's happening, what developers are saying on social platforms, others, etc. Something that the social media team would do. We also interact very closely on a one-on-one basis with many developers, and try to understand, help them resolve their issues, etc. Something that a support and a success team person might do. We also manage all of these initiatives and programs for these developers, etc. Typically what a program management or project management function would do.
Does.
We do a little bit of everything, which is spread across various different typical functions if DevRel was not a part of the picture. So I cannot really say that it aligns to each one of the teams or so. And it is one of the many dilemmas that many new organizations which are having a function of DevRel newly as well think about it, like, okay, where should this function really lie? Should it lie within this, or this? Everyone is mostly in a dilemma when it comes to where this function should lie in a typical organization, because it's a little bit of everything.
So, this question might sound a bit generic. Suppose there's someone who wants to get started when in his community journey. So, but supposingly he's an introvert, he cannot really speak up to other people well. So, and he wants to be a part of the DevRel role. So, how should one proceed with that?
Good question, and that's where underlining it is where something like open source would come in, because
Agree.
there are so many maintainers, who I know itself, who are introverts, uh,
Yes.
but yet their most significant contribution has been the project that they have built and contributed to itself, right? So, of course, one of the basic things I would say for anyone, aspiring to be in a development role is to first be a developer yourself, because that will help you get into the mindset of a developer, and then understand what really happens. Because there have been cases where I have interacted with others, or even within various organizations I've been at, where I said, as a developer, I don't think this is going to appeal to me. This won't help solve my problem, and I was able to say that very confidently because I've been in the same shoes, right? So,
Yes.
being firstly, that is what is going to be helpful. And second, see, like how I said, whether you are an introvert or an extrovert comes into picture if you are really uh, doing similar things of helping other people answer questions or speaking, etc. But it need not be the case. You can really help others just through means of code, by contributing, or by helping resolve issues, or by writing SDKs or tutorial, etc. So you don't really have to be like an extrovert or someone who speaks to be in a developer role necessarily.
That's an amazing way, because honestly, it is such an if I may say hybrid role, that it does sound really amazing to be involved in all aspects of the community. So another small question about GitHub specifically. So what are the things GitHub has in mind for the community in the coming years? As we have the pandemic hit us all hard, so we have all gone remote. So any new features, something new for the community that GitHub might be planning for the Indian ecosystem specifically?
Right, right. So, see, when we do various different things here at GitHub, we take input from across the world, from
Yes.
across our users, developers, everyone across the world in terms of what they're interested in. In fact, we have a public roadmap, in case many of them are not aware, of what's gonna come up in GitHub. So if you just go to github.com/github/roadmap, you will find what are all the features that's gonna be coming up on GitHub, and when approximately, and all of those things which are over there. So in terms of helping the community, etc., uh, there are various different things that we're working on, which will be announcing soon on on GitHub India Twitter handle. So twitter.com/GitHub India, specifically for helping people get started in the journey of open source itself, because that's something
Yes.
where people are very much looking forward to advice and guidance from GitHub in terms of how do you get started, what are some of the things that I need to look at, what are some of the projects that I want to contribute, how do I know whether I can contribute to this or not. There are a whole lot of things that we're trying to address and work through. But that's something which I would say just stay tuned. And also we have very very frequent online sessions,
Yeah.
like virtual meetups at
Universe was amazing.
sorry.
Universe was really an amazing event. I loved it.
Right, right. So there are things like Universe. There is also GitHub India virtual meetup. So if you go to meetup.com/slash GitHub India, you can find the GitHub India virtual meetup where we have very short duration, a couple of hours or so sessions very frequently, wherein many people from the community share their experiences and kind of get together, etc. Like how you mentioned, there is GitHub Universe, and a whole lot of other things that's gonna come up as well.
Understood. Apart from this, I had this last question I wanted to ask. Um, and how do you see the evolution of open source? Because it kind of blew up post in the last decade. So, what do you think will be the future of open source? What will be its impact in life of a developer?
Right, right. So, open source, you believe it or not, has been all around us. We might not recognize it, but open source has impacted virtually every little thing, that we are a part of. Some of, if you're using a phone, there are, you can go into the about and systems, and there are a list of probably open source licenses out there, which, the software is making use of. And even many of your machines that you're using make use of open source software, and it's typically kind of like touched upon every aspect of our day-to-day life as well. In terms of how it's growing, what I would encourage you to take a look at is every year we release a report called as State of the Octopus. That gives a complete picture of how really open source and languages, etc., are growing. And the 2020, the end of 2020 edition was released, I think, during Universe or a little bit before that. So you can go take a look at it as well, which will give you much more idea of how some of the adoption around different languages and frameworks are growing, or how really people who are contributing to open source are growing, etc. So, but a general theme that I would really like to share upon is that. Many of them have started realizing the benefits of contributing to open source, and helping them build a um, profile of contributing, as well as many of them are understanding the impact of their contributions as well. So I think, it's a journey that all of us are in terms of building an ecosystem wherein we are not just consuming the open source software, but we're also contributing back to it in some or the other way. Need not be code, it could be in just managing it, it could be in helping other people know about it, it could be in providing a direction, etc. So it's growing, and we just have to ensure that uh, that pace is continuous, so that all of us can benefit from the open source work that is being done by awesome people all across the world.
Definitely. So we have one last question. Can fresh undergraduates without GitHub Pro apply for the GitHub Campus Experts?
That's something which okay, I do not understand. I mean, fresh undergraduates, as in you have just entered undergrad, or you're finished your graduation.
I believe he's trying to say he has just entered an undergraduate program
Okay.
and he doesn't possess the GitHub Pro add-on to the slab of the user.
Okay, okay. Right. See, some of this eligibility criteria is what is there on, the campus experts page itself, right? But like how I said, you need to shift your way of looking at things in terms of, whether you're newly into undergrad, or you're just towards the end or so, etc. Speak more of what is the help that you're doing and the impact that you're able to do. The eligibility, there are certain nuances, of course, which are there out on the campus experts program page itself. If you have any questions regarding the eligibility, that's there are details provided to reach out to us over there as well. But on a high level, what I would say is, just focus on creating impact more than more than some of the nuances that would eventually come in after you are helping run that impact.
Understood. So, I mean, you really helped create an impact right here, like with us. Like, thank you very much for like giving a chunk of your time with us, as it was really helpful to talk to you. And a lot of people must have understood the role of Deverell much better than before. Because me personally, I had no clarity on the role of a Deverell. So I was pretty much blown away by how it works, and this has definitely got me interested. I would definitely love to look up everything you mentioned, and I feel so it will be the same for all of us here. So thank you very much, Karan, and looking forward to having you again at Script Foundation.
Great. Thanks, Rachit, and the remaining team as well for making this happen. And I hope some of this has been helpful for you to kind of understand a little more, and help you in your journey towards open source and just towards being a really good contributor out there in the community. So thanks once again. Stay safe and have a great day ahead.
Thank you. Have a great year ahead as well. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.